Hello and welcome to Movies and Tea. I'm your host as always, Elwood Jones, and joining me of course is my glamorous co-host, Miss Kim Lowe.
Hello.
If you of course stumped up your Patreon dollars, then you will have obviously seen by our big showgirl entrance that we are obviously dressed in our finest evening wear tonight to celebrate our top 10 discoveries of 2022. Possibly one of my favourite episodes to record every year, where myself and Kim tonight are going to be going through the movies that we saw for the first time. Because while other shows prefer to do like their roundup of the year, we prefer instead to focus on the films we've discovered throughout the year, providing a much more interesting list and hopefully giving yourselves some more movies to add on to your own wish list. But in terms of movie watching, Kim, how has 2022 been for yourself?
I mean, it's okay. It's obviously, I had a newborn, so my movie watching decreased a lot.
Yep.
And you cut out all of the film festival coverages and a good portion, and that usually fills out like a decent amount of the films that I watch. And you're here, and I think I'm like I don't know, 150 films off from my normal year or something like that.
Yeah,
so
of course.
So that's where it is. But I mean, most of the films in general that I've seen, I feel have been okay. It's been a pretty average year, I think. The films that really stood out, and that was like a top 20 that really stood out on my own list. And then a lot of stuff fell into the average. I didn't watch a lot of stuff that was really bad. There was maybe like one or two perhaps, but nothing. I don't think anything was lower than like a maybe 2 stars, something like that. But I can't remember because I don't remember bad movies that much.
Yeah, exactly the same as myself. It's sort of like I don't remember the really bad movies of the year this year, but I know that they were certainly there. And I'd say that when it came to like compiling my sort of like top 50 for the year, then that top 20, there was a whole bunch of movies that I wish I could obviously bump up further, but there's only so many sort of spots, and you kind of hit that point where it's sort of like, I really enjoyed these movies, but they're just not as good as the ones that are in that top 10. So I had to sort of make my peace with it and leave out things like, The Kid Detective and the Von Trier kick I've been on, which is obviously like meant that I've got to watch like things like Melancholia for the first time, like possibly the most beautiful movie about depression that's ever been made, and even things like These Final Hours, the Australian independent film about the end of the world. I wish that it just felt just a little short, much like Swing Girls and the Guar documentary. You just like wish that if on a different year these are films could have been like in a top 10, but sadly this year the competition was fierce for the top 10, and while there was a couple of movies that like hung on to that number one spot for like a longest time, I think it's another solid 10 that I've come away with this year, so I'm excited to share them with you tonight, as well as hear your turn, Kim.
Yes.
So, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So my number 10 for my first time watches this year is a Netflix original, I guess, which is fairly early in the year. It made my list, I think, and I knew it would, and that was Love and Leashes, a Korean romantic comedy film, which is based on the webtoon Moral Sense by Gyul. I don't know how to say that. Yeah, so this is a film about basically this new boss that comes in, like a female boss that comes in, and this worker suddenly becomes very interested in. It's like a team member who comes in, and then he suddenly they start exploring BDSM, and then he goes into a contract with her, and he like convinces her to go into that, and then basically that's what happened. It released around Valentine's Day, so it really like matched that the time, I guess. I would have to say when it first came out, I watched a lot of it, and that's one of the reasons I knew it would most probably make my list. Obviously, it's dropped down quite a bit from that point on, but it's a really good film, and like it's a different type of romantic comedy, and I mean, people who understand Korean humor, I guess, understand Korean humor and know why it's a really fun trip to watch, especially with the angle of how they take the the relationship that these two eventually build upon.
Fantastic. This was one that's on my watch list to still watch, and I know that you also had it as a Friday Film Club pick as well, so it gives me another kick to watch this one. But I couldn't help but look at this and think of the other BDSM film Secretary, and wondered if it was whether it was sort of like a lighter take on that. So that's another film that I've had multiple people like Christine over at the Feminine Critique and the Vern over at Cinema Recall both have recommended, and yet to actually sit down and watch as well. So I got a couple of movies there right off the bat to watch coming into the Christmas season.
I mean, I watched Secretary this year as well. Sadly, it didn't make my list. I think it was a pretty decent movie. I kind of came away with it more that it's kind of a cross between Love and Leashes, and then you have 50 Shades of Grey.
Yes, of course.
Because there's a bit of intensity to it, and then 50 Shades of Grey is kind of very similar to it. I remembered, I think we had an off-air conversation. I don't know if it was with you or someone, is there someone else? Maybe my husband, where I was talking about how 50 Shades of Grey, when someone did that, it was kind of like someone watched Twilight, and then they were like, I really like Secretary, and they decided to use a fan fiction where they used the two main characters and then they changed it into, the secretary type of scenario. But, obviously I didn't do a whole lot of research into, 50 Shades of Grey. What was the inspiration? Where did it all come from? And if it was someone trying to, do like they were liking Secretary and they based it off of it, they're probably not going to say that.
No, of course not. No, But I need to. I still need to watch it. I know that it's a James Spader movie, which is the second sort of like kinky movie he did, because he also did Crash as well for Cronenberg, which is about people who get off on car crashes. Mm-hmm. And that's a very surprisingly sexy movie. But so I know that he's obviously not afraid of doing that sort of kinkier material. So I would have to give Secretary a watch as well. So, but no, great pick, Kim.
Yeah, and for your number 10?
For my number 10, it's a documentary from 2004, I Like Killing Flies, about Kenny Shopskin. Kenny Shopskin had a eatery over in the village over in Greenwich called Shopson's, and he did obviously move from the property, but this is a documentary which basically follows him and his restaurant and his quirky personality as he runs a restaurant where you can't turn up if you've got more than a table of 4. He has runs a menu of over 500 items and constantly seems to be making things up while operating out of the most DIY kitchen you will possibly ever see. And yet this is also a wonderful slice of food porn. This is a really fantastic documentary. Not only does it obviously capture the quirky personality of Kenny Shopson and his family, but also just embraces that sort of love of cooking that obviously he had. And he would go on to write the wonderful cookbook Eat Me, which contained his personal philosophies as well as recipes. And a really sort of fun documentary about a quirky sort of character, someone who probably wouldn't be maybe sort of overlooked unless you sort of live in the sort of New York area, which he's kind of was like a local legend, and suddenly has passed away, and I think this documentary serves as a fitting tribute to him. But it's one that I sort of revisited prior to like us coming on the show tonight, just to make sure it sort of like deserved the spot that I gave it a 10. But I think, as I say, it sort of reinforced everything I sort of love about this documentary. It's just a wonderfully quirky character, and at the same time a healthy dose of food porn as well. So
who doesn't love food porn, right?
No.
I actually have a movie. My next movie is actually a lot of food porn. But yeah, I always get amazed at how you find all these like quirky documentaries of things that I've never heard of.
I just love documentaries about like subgroups or just quirky characters. Those are like my favorite documentaries to sort of hunt down. So if you like got a documentary about like some bizarre subgroup of like people who are into something like I think it was last year where we had School World, which was about the guys who like to build cardboard weapons and battle each other, which I thought was really fantastic. And that was by the same director as who did Clapboard Jungle.
Okay.
It was like one of his documentaries. He just went out and found this guy who, him and his friends just like to build cardboard weapons and fight each other in like huge fantasy battles. And then they go to Australia, and the Australians like took it to a whole other scale with like building vehicles and buildings out of cardboard and stuff. So yeah, that's my sort of quirky documentary for this year's list. I like Killing Flies. You can find it on YouTube, so you can watch it for free on there. I don't think it's ever had a physical release as such, even though it's one that I think would be, much like A Penguin's Memory, would be really great if Criterion had picked it up, just in terms of like film preservation. So
I mean, I'm definitely going to add that to my list. It seems like I do like quirky stuff, but I never seem to be able to find any of them. I'm always like, stuck in my own little crime documentaries on Netflix, and I never really break out of that.
It's just the people you hang around with who tend to drop stuff. It's because I'm like hanging around like Gentleman's Guide to Midnight Cinema or from like Facebook and in their group, and they're just constantly dropping weird films. Or if I'm listening to like episodes of Kissing Contest, again they drop weird films because they're all big cult cinema fans. So it's just the cinema weirdos I surround myself with who just drop these wonderful recommendations for me. This was a lot of Drek.
Oh, that's what makes your list unique.
Yeah. What about your number 9, Kim?
Okay, my number 9 is 2007's Waitress, which is a dramedy of some sort, I guess. And it's directed by Adrian Shelley, who unfortunately has passed away. And this is basically a movie about a woman who's like living in this small town in an abusive, controlling marriage, who ends up getting pregnant, which she doesn't want because she originally was planning to save enough to leave town, and now obviously she can't. But she is working as a pie genius at this pie like a waitress, as this like pie diner type of thing. And basically the film is just, she has these pie things that like these pie ideas that I really love. And every time she goes into a certain situation, she'll make these different pies and then you see her combining it. And then it's like, it pops into that whole pie making type of montage of like, oh, this is a pie that I want to make about, the not wanting a baby or some pie or,
yeah.
or, like the whatever. And I think it's so quirky in that sense that, and mostly because I watched this mostly because it was Kerry Russell, and I really love her ever since I saw her in Felicity. But no, I mean the movie, because it's gotten a musical since then and all that, I felt like I really wanted to watch it, and obviously that landed on Netflix, so I was able to give it a go. And it's really, really good, and not only just for the food porn, but I think there's like this really nice comedy element to it. And a really nice, I guess like a life revelation about how things, about like finding the courage to kind of face your life in a certain way, like kind of break out of all the toxicity that's in your life and have the courage to move in your own direction, right? I don't know. Have you seen this movie before?
I've seen the DVD because it used to constantly be on the shelf at Borders. But
Okay.
It's one that I've never actually watched, and now you've really convinced me to go and check it out now.
If you like to watch a lot of pie porn,
it's sort of like you're just saying, oh, she likes to make pies, and I was like, I've not seen that idea done since like Pushing Daisies, and I like pies, so why not? How many of these pies you replicated, or has it like inspired you to go and like make more pies, Kim?
Well, I haven't had time to make any pies, okay. But I definitely like some of the combos she makes is really wild, and like I just think it's crazy, like some of the stuff that she does, and you kind of like start thinking about, okay, well, why do these ingredients inspire that flavor type of thing, right? So it's nice because there's kind of like there's a really nice type of relationship that builds between her and Nathan Fillion's character, and it's just it's like the whole dynamic of it is really nice. And I like it. For a movie about a waitress who ends up like cheating with their doctor who's also married. It's a very it's surprisingly deep.
Cool. For myself, I went with Giants and Toys in 1958, which is a Japanese satirical comedy about warring candy companies. In this, you've got the three candy manufacturers. You've got World, Giants, and Apollo, who are basically looking for what the promotional campaign that's going to give them the edge over their competitors. And it basically follows these two guys who work for World, who think that they've got the winning edge when they discover this girl called Kyoko, who's a working class girl who's got bad teeth, but at the same time she's super charismatic and ends up becoming this like world renowned star and sort of face of their campaign. And it at the same basically follows his pair as they try to reel her in as the star gets bigger and her sort of personality becomes more out of control, all at the same time while trying to deal with the ever-changing battlefield of these warring candy companies. It's a really, really fun film. I mean, this is directed by Yasu Masumura, who also did Black Test Car, which was about warring car production companies, so he likes to do these sort of slice-of-life comedies. But this is a film which is just absolutely sort of like charming, and as I said, it's just about warring candy companies, which is kind of fun in itself. And Hitomi Nozu stars as Kyoko, who is just charming at the nth degree. She starts off as this sort of like almost childlike presence who's got these tadpoles that she's just absolutely attached to. When she gets a big first check through from her modelling gig, she's announced that she's going to go and buy crackers, and as the film goes on, she would see her becoming much more of this diva as she starts to realise her worth and how her rising star manages to sort of eclipse what she was initially hired to do. So yes, Giants and Toys was a really fun discovery, and this is one we covered over my other show, the Asian Cinema Film Club, as my co-host Steven's a big fan of this one, and he recommended it to me originally, and I have to agree, it's a really, really great movie.
Sounds like a fun time. I mean, I've never heard of it, obviously, because my knowledge of is it 1950s?
Yeah,
movies
this is 1958,
is
so.
Yeah, it's very thin, even in American cinema. So let's not even go to Japanese cinema. But no, it sounds really fun. I mean, I think that Japanese humor in general is pretty unique. So I don't know. I mean, that obviously comedy is very subjective. So it'll be interesting to see if I ever find a movie whether.
Yeah.
Or and get a chance to see it, whether the humor would work for me, because I'm not a person that watches a whole lot of Japanese films, so it's not really top of my list. But I mean, the premise and everything sounds really interesting.
It's available on the Arrow player, so you can watch it. Yeah. You can stream it online, and yes, it's got this sort of like really quirky sort of humor to it. So there's a scene where the companies are sort of like announcing their prizes that they're going to be giving away, and World are going with space, so it's all like very sort of 1950s sort of like Buck Rogers-esque space stuff, so it's ray guns and bubble space helmets, and then their competitors are a Giant, who have this giant Japanese man, and they say they're giving away like animals, and you think, oh, like toy animals, but no, they got like monkeys that they're giving away, and you think, what sort of candy company is going to give away live animals as a prize for buying candy? And then there's little quirky things like they got the little ticker tape in the background which shows like the stocks of the different companies, and because they've run it, it's an ongoing thing, so you get to the end of the tape and you just see it's like this downward plunge, like all the companies have crashed, even though it just means they just haven't updated that far. So Kim, at number 8, what did you have?
Number 8, I chose a very recent film, It's one of the few festival films that I'm adding in here, and this is a Mexican film called Mex Zombies that I watched during Toronto After Dark Film Festival. And it's basically a horror comedy which blends this zombie style of basically zombie version of Stranger Things, The Goonies, with like a zombie land type of vibe. It's a really really fun adventure, mostly because you're basically around a group of teens who group up together to keep the zombies, to protect the world, basically, and to keep them inside the gated community and try to stop them before they can escape into stop them before they have an apocalypse. And like all this is set during Halloween night, so which makes it even more funny because people in the gated community who don't know what's going on basically can't tell whether it's a real zombie or a fake one, right? And at the same time, this is kind of a love letter to mostly zombie movies, but a lot of other movies as well, where you have one character who is like a huge film fanatic, and he'll drop a lot of stuff like about films, and then during the film you'll also have a lot of people mentioning like or having certain lines or something like that pop up that is very basically like paying tribute to a lot of Hollywood films in general.
That sounds fantastic. I'm just looking up on Letterboxd now, and I can see you're the only person out of my friend group who's seen it. So, well done you.
Well, it's because it's still in the festival route. So normally I wouldn't like. I last year I did add a few festival films in there as well for the top 10 first time watches, but. No, I mean, this one is, the rare, it's like my comeback to the festival gradually. And it's one of the films this year, I think, that really, really stand out. I mean, I know that, I'm one of those people who are very skeptical now against zombie movies because I think that it's been overdone. And there's a lot of things that's been done over and over again. But Mech Zombies, I think, takes a really nice angle, and it has a really refreshing take. There's a good balance between the comedy. The horror isn't really, like, crazy. It kind of reminds you a little of Shaun of the Dead type of humor, where it's, like, a really good balance. It's not really scary too much, but the zombies are done well. But at the same time, you also have this really nice, like, humor that's going on. So it's a really good time, I think.
Fantastic. I totally agree with yourself that zombies are very sort of overplayed because it's sort of like the go-to if you've got like a indie horror production. It's always like, oh, let's go make a zombie movie because they're pretty easy to put together. But at the same time, it's always fun when you get someone doing something new with a zombie movie, like something like One Cut the Dead, or to the other end of the spectrum, something like The Sadness, which I also saw this year.
Yes. That Sadness would have made my list, but it's one movie that I would not watch.
It's a
again
wild time, isn't it?
Oh, it's a wild time. No, I mean, that one is like, it's like a one and done. Yeah. That movie is a one and done. It goes way too overboard, and I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't score it as high as a lot of people did. Yeah. Was I thought a lot of it just went way over. But I mean, I think it was very revolutionary. In terms of a zombie film for a Taiwanese story.
It's another of those films, much like The Raid, where we got a director from the West going over to the East and making some absolutely bonkers movie with local talent. And as I said, much like with Gareth Evans with the Raid movies, where he went over and made these two absolutely bonkers ultra-violent kung fu movies, which obviously paved the way for the likes of The Night Comes for Us, and sort of highlighted to a bunch of really fantastic talent who've now made it over to the West as well. And I think The Sadness certainly did the same, but at the same time, everything that was in the film, it didn't feel like exploitive. It just felt like, this fits in with the theme we're going with here. But I can much like yourself, it didn't make my top 10 list either, so I think I got everything I needed to out of that one viewing.
and then it like, and then I remembered it haunted me for the month after. So I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. Obviously, I mean, if you can take like really intensely gory, bloody, very obscene type of movies, then I think that there are a lot of people I remember when it was doing the festival circuit. Obviously, I didn't watch it during the festival circuit, who really loved this movie. They thought it was incredible. It was revolutionary for what it was doing, and all that stuff. But, you know, I just, you know, I think there's always something that's a little too much. You know, Raw kind of straddles the, you know, a little too much, but it does it in kind of a good way. It's not like, it is disturbing in the moment, but it's not like haunting you for weeks, you know. But this one is like, you know, I can't think about the sadness and be like, oh goodness, you know. I think about the sadness and I was like, oh, that scene, I can't, you know, like.
I know, I know what you mean. There's certain films that, like, when I look at like especially we were doing like the top 20 list, and there's things such as like Annette that I still think about like on a daily basis, but at the same time it didn't make my top 10 list. So it's funny like just how certain movies will stick with you even if they're not going to make that sort of top 10. And I think certainly when it came to the Sundance, there are certain things that are still sticking with me now. But yeah.
Yeah. So what's your number 8?
And it's a completely different end of the spectrum again. This is from 1964, and it's Pale Flower, directed by Mashiro Shinoda, another discovery from the Asian Cinema Film Club. This is from the Japanese New Wave, and it follows this Yakuza gangster called Murakai, who has just been released from prison for serving a sentence of murder. And he's a lifer within the Yakuza. He's dedicated to his boss, and his basically likes to spend his time hanging around gambling dens. And it's here that he runs into a woman called Seiko, who is kind of like a thrill seeker and sort of in turn turns his world upside down as she follows him around various sort of like gambling dens and just leads him on these sort of wild harebrained adventures as she's kind of like this thrill seeker. This is a movie, as I said, it's about gambling, and you wouldn't think that watching a bunch of people play a tile game, kind of like Mahjong, although it's not Mahjong, that I still have no clue what the rules are, but it is still one of the most engrossing things in the world to watch. So yeah, with when it came to Pale Flower, this isn't a film which has got like big sort of action set pieces. It hasn't got like war and Yakuza. As I said, it is just kind of like this slice of life as this well-weary gangster finds himself just sort of like fascinated yet kind of horrified by this woman who sort of like worked her way into his life. At the same time, the threat of turf war threatens his loyalties to his role within his gang. As I said, this is part of the Japanese New Wave, so it is a very sort of real sort of it's a very sort of stylistically shot movie. As I said, it's got a real sort of jazzy score as well, so if you're into jazz, then you'll probably really get a kick out of that as well. But no, this is one that I believe is on Criterion, but I would recommend checking out. It's just, you wouldn't think that a movie, as I said, that is just about people playing tile games. It would be as engrossing as it is, and yet it does that wonderful thing of using repetition of sound, much like Audition, where you see these people use the same sort of terms again, the tapping of tiles, and it just sort of like really becomes quite pleasing to the ear. But yeah, that's one of my highbrow entries for this list.
Well, obviously I haven't watched it. We refer back to my previous comment about Japanese films.
Of course.
Yeah, but I'm looking at this up right now, and it's saying that it's influenced by Charles Baudelaire's Les Fleurs du Mal, which I looked up, and it was like this poetry about flowers of evil, and it's pretty interesting. Like when you think about it, I think it refers to, you know, like when you get influenced by a kind of like a woman who brings more toxicity into your ever destructive life, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like,
And
just have that one person in you who can just completely upset your status quo, really. So, and yet you somehow have this
yeah.
weird obsession with keeping them around. So,
I think it's pretty cool. I really do, like I really do love the few Japanese films I watched that has these like crazy women in it. And I remember when we reviewed First Love, that was one of the moments that we really loved, was that woman who was like just, full of who was just like super crazy, and she was just like running around and unstoppable. And she was hunting down this guy or something, and it was I think that with films like that, they're, no matter like how how you say it's highbrow or not, I think that there's a space for everything. It's something that I realized when I was watching like the Festival du Nouveau Cinema, which is all new cinema stuff, art house and all that. And you always think about these movies which you talk about, and then you explain like the premise of someone, and it sounds like it's the most boring movie in the world, but then there is this like captivating element in it that you can't understand until you actually watch the movie.
oh yeah, I definitely can think of like a couple of films right off the bat. Like Audition is one that I often think of. It's sort of like while I love Audition, I couldn't think of like making someone sit through it because it would have been such a slow burn. The same with like Lost in Translation. Like when you explain the plot of Lost in Translation, it's just about two people in Japan sort of like finding themselves, and there is no real plot to it. And I was surprised that movie was like liked by so many people, because I sort of like thought it was just this movie that is essentially about nothing, and yet it's like just really engrossing in the most randomest way.
Yeah, and you're even talking about some pretty big movies. Like, I'm in my mind, there's always one movie that I watched in the new cinema, which is called Tourism, which I don't think it ever made it anywhere big, but it was about two girls who won a free trip to Singapore. And it was two Japanese girls who won a trip to Singapore, and then they get to Singapore, and then they get separated. And they eat, and basically the girl goes on like a trip where she starts like trying to meet back up with a girl and with her friend, and she ends up like eating and then seeing different foods, and it's like a traveling film, but something about it is so fun and so entertaining because you're watching her explore this new world and stuff like that. But if you told that to someone, you'd be like, why would you find that interesting to watch? Type of thing, right? But yeah, I mean,
sometimes you just need someone to give you a push to watch some of these things. This is what I found this year. There's a bunch of stuff that I probably wouldn't have watched otherwise, but because I've been in the position to have someone metaphorically push me to watch them. So things like Face of Another, and obviously this film is like things that I probably wouldn't have watched otherwise. But being in a fortunate position where someone just like saying, "Nope, we're going to sit down and we're going to watch this," and that's sometimes what you need. Maybe someone to do that with like Solaris next year. So the 3+ hours of Russian cinema that it is. So
whoever you're going to give that to is probably going to hate.
Yeah,
you
probably.
Afterwards.
So
But
so we'll see. We'll see how good the friendship is after that. So, number 7, Kim.
Number 7 is surprisingly, after I said I don't watch Japanese cinema, it's a Japanese movie. It's 2003's Tokyo Godfathers, which I literally just watched before we did the recording of this. So it's a very, very fresh addition to the list. By, the very impressive Satoshi Kon, who has, obviously left us. And very sad because, when you look at Satoshi Kon and even the 2 movies that I've watched of him, the other one is Paprika, he is such a talented, like, his mind is incredible. The things that he's able to write, the stories that he's able to create, and very different from Paprika. Tokyo Godfathers is set in realism. There is no fantasy here. It's a very grounded film about these 3 homeless men who end up finding finding a child on Christmas Eve, a little baby in the pile. I guess it's a garbage pile. And they end up setting up on a mission to go find the baby's mom. And obviously, you know, the cast of characters is very much like a family, because you have one who is a trans woman, and then there's also, you know, there's like a younger girl, man,
It's a
is it
girl.
a man? Younger girl.
Yeah.
It's a girl, yeah, younger girl. And then you also have like the actual man who's like a, you know, a middle-aged man who's kind of, you know, but throughout the story you slowly realize that all these people, they're not grounded in, you know, the story that he creates is not about homeless people who are asking for your pity. It's really, these homeless people have chosen to be there because they've done something that they haven't been able to face up to you know, get, you know, apologize or, you know, find their resolution with. So it turns out to be a pretty sentimental story as you go through this, and these three who don't really know each other's stories eventually learn each other's stories throughout the whole process. I think it's really fun because this one has a bit of comedy to it. It's a lot of quirk. It's a bit odd, but it also is a really interesting, I guess, an alternate Christmas film, which is fitting considering, you know, we're heading into the holidays as we're recording this, but, you know, obviously probably not when it's released. I really like the themes of this one. I think that there's something here that captures a different angle to what they're trying to say, and it makes the film really, really unique to watch.
Yes, Tokyo Godfathers is an absolutely fantastic film. I'm a huge fan of Satoshi Kon. I think that his whole filmography, while cut short due to his sad passing from cancer, throughout is just fantastic throughout. Certainly the majority of his work is either focused on dreams or has a very sort of surrealist edge to it. But Tokyo Godfather, it marked a real sort of departure from his usual themes. As you said, it's this three homeless people that are each dealing with their own reasons that led them to being on the streets in the first place. So this quest that they find themselves on to reunite this abandoned baby with its family forces them to sort of reevaluate how they got to where they are. And there's a wonderful scene where the former drag queen member of the group, Queen Hannah, she goes to a gay bar, and they ask her about this former lover she has, and there's this slight instance where it's sort of like hinted, oh, did he like pass away from HIV? And it's like, no, he slipped in the shower, but it's done in such a wonderfully subtle way, and that you actually just really attach to these unique characters who have, as you said, they've created this family unit for themselves while living out on the streets of Tokyo. And it's a beautifully designed and short movie. I think Satoshi Kon is one of those few animators, especially directors of animation, whose name we can say, and it's got the same sort of names of recognition of like Murakami. He sort of like transcends above, whereas a lot of animation directors don't sort of get known. It feels like more of a collective. Satoshi Kon's voice has always been very sort of unique and original, and I think if you've not seen one of his films, I think this is also a fantastic starting point. It's certainly not as heavy as Perfect Blue, and it's not as sort of reliant on like knowing things like about like film history that like things like Millennium Actress have, but throughout his whole filmography, he didn't put a foot wrong for myself, and I've enjoyed everything that he did. So I'm glad that you finally got to see this one, Kim.
Oh yeah, it was a fantastic discovery, as obviously it's made it on my list. It's so nice, but obviously probably by the time this episode comes out it would have left Netflix Canada, but hopefully it's still in Netflix somewhere else.
Of course. For myself, I have from 1972 The Black Tavern, directed by Teddy Yip Wing Chol. This is a kung fu movie that's Mike Dick over at Kissing Contest and Vetro Pros and Border Boss and First 7-Inch Club. Is an absolutely huge fan of this and will recommend it at any given moment. The film itself is just a wonderful slice of kung fu weird, as you've got a group of martial artists convening on this black tavern of the title, where they serve human remains as pork buns, and at the same time a government official is due to arrive carrying a cache of gold which the various parties all want to get their hands on. As I said, this is a wonderful slice of kung fu weird, so you have fantastical weapons, you have hopping vampires, you have cannibals. It just basically throws so many different ideas at the screen while blending in some great kung fu action as well. So if you're a fan of kung fu cinema, then I would recommend checking this out, because it's one of those overlooked ones, even though I do think it's been revived by Celestial, so you can watch it in various places now. But for the longest time, it was a pain in the ass to get hold of, so I was really happy to finally see it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Black Tavern is a Shaw Brothers movie, right? Yep. So it's I'm looking at it right now, and it looks really interesting. There's the cast itself is also pretty good, since, you know, using my knowledge of Hong Kong cinema.
There's certain people who you'd like see time and time again who like pop up, people like Jimmy Wang Yu and Sammo Hung, Yong Biao, and then there's other people who will have done like many movies through Shaw Brothers, but unless you watch a lot of Shaw Brothers movies, you won't necessarily recognize who they are, like members like the Venom Mob, for example. If you watch a lot of Shaw Brothers movies, you'll be like, oh, I totally recognize who these people are, but they may not have like the name recognition for like people who just watch like a lot of like Jackie Chan movies or Bruce Lee movies and that. So
yeah, talking about Jackie Chan, he actually has a little role in this one.
Does he now?
Yeah, as some official high servant.
Okay, it's probably just him being kicked in the face or something. So if normally when it's like, if it's some like name role like that, it's just like one of his early stunt roles where he was sort of like one of like 5 or 6 guys in a scene who would just be like getting kicked in the face or something. Like he's in Fist of Fury, the early Bruce Lee movie. So there's a couple of Bruce Lee movies where you can say Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan fought, because Jackie Chan was working as like stunt team and like Enter the Dragon and Fist of Fury, and he'd be like, oh, you see that guy who got kicked for the wall? That's Jackie Chan.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really good ones. You know, you have like Wu Ma, who was also great. He's like the really fantastic supporting actor who's just who's in so many good Hong Kong films, and yet, you know, I don't think he's ever been in like a main role. But yeah, it's a really interesting one. I'm not a very, I haven't watched a lot of Shaw Brothers, unfortunately. But Netflix has a good few of them now.
Yeah, so. And again, the Arrow Player, they've put out the 2 ShawScope box sets now, and I believe you can rent pretty much all the Shaw Brothers movies on Amazon Prime and iTunes, places like that. So, and there are plenty of them. The Shaw Brothers catalog is not just like martial arts movies. They'd like ventured off and did like romantic movies and did exploitation movies, and they even did a couple of giant monster movies like Super Inframan and The Mighty Peking Man. So there's some weird stuff in the Shaw Brothers. Don't just think it's like kung fu movies. They made all sorts of movies for that studio. So
yeah, it kind of reminds me a little of the very few Japanese film that I was watching with it was a yokai. Was it the one?
About the spirit monsters.
Yeah. that one was a trip.
Yeah, Takashi Miike just did like 2 movies for that series. He did like the revival ones. I can't. Great Yokai War was one of his. So.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, that one hit the festival circuit. So no, yeah, I watched the 1960s, the Yokai Monsters Spook Warfare.
Oh yeah, that's great. That's also an hour player as well. So
That is an odd movie. And you know, it was kind of it was odd and funny, but unfortunately it didn't make my list. But I had a really great
yeah,
time watching it. As the more I thought about it, the more it kind of resonated, I think.
cool. But what did make your list when it came to number 6, Kim?
Number 6 is I don't know. I kind of had a fight between this one and eventually the 2020 Underwater one against, you know, Invisible Man.
Okay.
Both of the movies I thought were really, really good. But somehow I think that Underwater is one that I really appreciated. I thought it was so fun. It was a lovely take on, you know, spoiler alert, Cthulhu. But, yeah, so it was, you know, like, Kristen Stewart is an actress that, you know, I think that as you dig deeper right now, as you see her more and more, it's really great because, you know, barring the Twilight experience, most of what you watch of hers before and after is actually pretty acceptable. And even great, because Underwater is, I think it's such a fun, it's such a great, horror movie set underwater. There's so many things that I think is so amazing about it. I guess I should talk a little about what it's about. Basically, Underwater is about a group of workers who are working at this drilling facility when suddenly they feel this kind of earthquake, which starts destroying the facility. And then a group eventually end up merging, like finding each other through all the rubble and all this stuff in near, I guess, the center, which hasn't started sinking yet. Hasn't been like completely destroyed yet. As they try to get to the pods to leave, they start realizing that outside surrounding them is actually a lot of hostile creatures. And that's basically the story, I think.
Yeah. Underwater made my number 4 slot back when I did the first time watch it 2020. So I'm a huge fan of this one. I understand what you're saying when it's you look at the actors who are in Twilight and they sort of have that sort of like they're forever known as like the Twilight kids, people like Robert Pattinson and Kristen Stewart, and yet at the same time they've took that sort of financial security those movies gave them, and they got on to make really interesting projects. Like Robert Pattinson's currently doing like the Batman, but before that he did like Good Times and High Life. Kristen Stewart himself has also done some really great stuff in the indie stuff like American Ultra and Adventureland, and certainly Underwater, which sadly due to some horrible distribution just never really reached the audience that it did, and I think it's slowly becoming a bit of a cult favourite as more and more people are sort of discovering, but sadly didn't revive the underwater horror genre, which I really hoped that it would, because I really enjoyed that brief moment when we had like 3 underwater horror movies that all came out at the same time. We had like The Abyss and Leviathan and Deep Star 6, and it's this little mini genre in horror, and it suddenly just sort of like came and went. But Underwater was like a real great throwback to those movies, and features a fantastic exploding head as well.
Yeah. I think Underwater, for at least in Canada, I think it released really close to lockdown. So I think that had a lot to do with why it didn't do good. You know, back in the days when we had the lockdown after a few cases, and you know, we're looking at stuff that's completely different now. But I mean, Underwater is really, it's like, it even has like a really great cast as well. You know, you have obviously Kristen Stewart, but you also have Vincent Cassel, and you have, you know, John Gallagher Jr., who, you know, we most probably, like, I remember him most when he did 10 Cloverfield Lane. Yeah. And then he did Hush. So very good. And then you have Mamadou Athie, who's been in a lot more stuff recently. Most notably, I think, was I noticed him was when he did Archive 81, the series that I don't think anybody watched, but actually was really, really good on Netflix. And after that, I think recently he's been doing some other films. I've been seeing his name a lot more recently, and I just and he was in Patty Cakes, which also almost made my list.
Yeah, another Friday Film Club pick that I still need to watch as well. So
yes. Yeah, and obviously you have T.J. Miller. So it's a really good cast that's here as well. So it's sad that it didn't get the exposure that it needed. Hopefully, people will find it and it'll turn into like a cult classic or something in the future.
Certainly hope so. I mean, certainly a lot of people are excited when they've discovered it. When I've seen on like the various film boards and stuff, it's like it'll like turn up on like a Film 4 showing, or they stumble across it on like the streaming services, and they like, why are we not talking about this movie? So we're hopefully, and maybe down the line we'll get Underwater 2. You never know the way the film industry goes now. So
do you really want a sequel?
Yes, I do.
If it's the same director, right, and then he's doing the same thing, he's able to create.
If we can get 5
story.
Avatar movies, we can get a second underwater movie.
True, that is very, very true.
Speaking of space epics, my number 6 pick is Denis Villeneuve's Dune. Or as it probably should be better known, Dune Part 1, as essentially here he splits the first book into 2 parts, which is probably the best decision he could have made, because Dune is this big unwieldy tome that I've tried to read multiple times and got lost in multiple times, and yet it's this fantastical world which has essentially replaced what Star Wars was for the longest period, until the fans killed my interest in that whole series, and then Disney buying the property killed it only further. So I'm now a Dune kid. Dune, if you're not familiar with it, it's obviously based the first in the Frank Herbert series of books, based around the planet Arrakis, which produces the spice which makes space travel possible, and is also one of the most valuable commodities in the world. This is a world of desert planets, giant sandworms, and epic warring families on a grand scale, as we have the noble House of Atreides going up against the evil and corrupted House Harkonnen, led here by Peter Stormare in a fantastic led by Stellan Skarsgård, as who puts in a wonderful performance as Baron Harkonnen. But no, this is a really fantastic adaptation of the very complicated book. I think they do a really great job of breaking it down and not overcomplicating things, because it's a book which has got 100+ characters. It's got a complex political system, and by splitting it into 2, it sort of like gives you this great foundation chunk, and then we'll have the second one, which is out next year, which is going to introduce all the elements we didn't see in this one, such as like the Emperor space, who will be played by Christopher Walken. We'll get to see the space navigators and all this other wonderful stuff as we round out the first book, with plans obviously to remake the other books, which only get weirder as they go on. So I really can't wait to for this series to become like really popular, and we get into like the 4th book, and we got like the human sandworm hybrids and other weird shit that they work into this. But just to put into perspective, they did, when Herbert died, his son put out a series of books called Prelude to Dune, which is like a prequel series that is supposed to establish everything. And even reading those 4 books, I still have no clue what is going on in Dune half the time. But this is a visually fantastic movie. It's an exciting world, and they've just done such a great job with the material that I'm really excited for the second part, which is out this coming year, so 2023.
That's cool. I haven't watched Dune yet. I think I watched the previous adaptation. The
David Lynch one.
Yeah. Eons ago. Far enough that I don't remember it much. But, I mean, I always think Denis Villeneuve is always such an interesting director to watch. Like when I was looking at Dune, I think I felt like it was promising when, you watch Blade Runner 2049 and you kind of like, okay, well, that seems very similar to this. It seems like, that sort of fantasy sci-fi thing that really works for him. Obviously, Denis Villeneuve has done some really impressive movies, Sicario, and, even before he became such a Hollywood name, I think he did some really, really weird and lovely stuff all at the same time. I think my first movie that I exposed to Denis Villeneuve is Surprisingly Maelstrom, which is a movie that I really, really love and I would love to revisit again because it's so weird. It starts and ends with a talking fish on a chopping board. So, Dune is definitely on my list, something that I want to watch. But I think a part of me, whenever things get split into part 1, part 2, and I haven't really watched anything of it previously, I always tend to want to wait for the whole thing to come out before I watch it. Just to kind of have like a
you don't want
connection through the whole thing, right? So that you don't give yourself that time to forget, and then the second part comes and you're like, oh no, what was this? Like
Yeah, of course. But yeah, I think he does not only has an incredible cast here, and certainly if you liked Blade Runner, then I think then you're very much in the sort of mindset for this one is. Because certainly when David Lynch's version of Dune came out, they were sort of like, oh, this is going to be the new Star Wars, and it's like, no, Dune is nothing like Star Wars at all. So it's more based around like political moves and stuff, even though this one's got some really good action sequences in it as well. So and as I say, it's got giant sandworms. What more do you need? So this takes us into the top half of the list now. On to number 5, Kim.
Number 5 is 2018's Profile. I'm a huge fan of Screen Life films. They are so good. I really, really love them. If you don't know what Screen Life is, it's kind of a term that was coined for the bunch of films that Timur Bekmambetov, I can't say his name properly, did. Basically, it's kind of like found footage, but with new technology. And, like Skype and computer screens and all that stuff. And he did like a trilogy of it with obviously it started with Unfriended, but he was doing Profile, and then he also did what was that other one?
Searching?
Yes, Searching. That's it. And yeah, this one that I'm talking about is Profile, which is based on a nonfiction book, The Skin of a Jihadist. And it talks about this woman who is a journalist, and she's set on a mission to go under an alias where she's trying to approach the person who is, an ISIS fighter from Syria. And she's trying to basically understand the process of how they recruit young European women into ISIS. And in the process, she becomes infatuated with this person. She gets very into this whole relationship, and things kind of get really, really out of hand. Profile is really captivating. I think like the whole idea of how they use the camera and the Skype and the different technology that they use to kind of capture the conversation and just, like how everything works. It feels very realistic. And I think that it's even anything like this, it's even more real when you're watching it in some type of, obviously some type of screen, preferably a computer screen. It feels so, like the danger, you can almost feel it and that sort of thing. And the movie gets so gripping. And I think it's really amazing how you're able to do this. I really wish people would explore this kind of Screen Life element a little bit more, because I feel like that's kind of like the future of found footage. But yeah, it was a very, very like a film that I waited a long time to watch, and I think that it exceeded my expectations of how good it was.
Fantastic. Much like yourself, I'm a big fan of this genre, though I never had a name for it until now. So thank you, Kim. I really enjoyed both Unfriended and Unfriended Dark Web. I also enjoyed Searching as well, which I think was just a really great thriller. The only downside to this genre, much like in the fact that when we look at found footage, we got a lot of shaky cam. There's a lot of within this genre we often have things like on the screen, but if you're like me myself and trying to cheaped out the size of your TV, it's a little hard to read. So you got to get up and read the little tiny writing on the screen. But apart from that, I think it's a super effective method of storytelling, and I'm really excited to see this one. So,
well, I think that Profile would be perfect in that sense because Profile is focused a lot on not so many words as much as it's about like the conversation between this woman and this Bilal, who is this ISIS fighter. And it's just like the manipulation that's going on and that sort of thing. It's a very captivating conversation that they have. The main thing that she does big research for is basically like news articles with like gigantic words. So
it's a tabloid, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So you're not really gonna it's really not super hard. It's just a lot of like conversation that's going on back and forth, layers of conversation as well when she starts and this tech is trying to help her and set up the technology for the whole thing and blah blah blah.
Cool. Yeah, really padding out my watch list tonight. So we got pies and zombies, and now we got found footage. It's just all coming together for Christmas now.
So what was your number 5 pick?
Number 5, we have Nicolas Cage's outstanding performance in Pig from 2021, directed by Michael Saranowski, who is currently set to do A Quiet Place Day 1. He also directed Rings, but don't hold that against him. Here, Nicolas Cage plays a truffle hunter who lives out in the Oregon wilderness with his prized pet, Pig, which gets kidnapped, and he sets out to the big city of Portland to go and find it back, venturing into the restaurant underworld to try and find out who is responsible for taking his pig. While we've obviously talked a bit tonight about food porn, this one could also be classified as ingredient porn, as the finale involves Nicolas Cage decimating someone's will with the fine cooked meal. But the preparation for it is just absolutely tantalizing as you hear him talk about ingredients and try and find various things to prepare this meal. But no, this is it's been a weird couple of years for Nicolas Cage as he's been working off his debt. And suddenly putting out interesting, much like Anthony Wong, he's often been the most interesting performance in some very bad movies, but when it came to Pig, this was certainly one of those more interesting movies that he sort of worked in there, much like Mandy and Colour from Outer Space, and I think this is probably one of his best performances that I've seen him in quite a while, and certainly it's a lot more toned down. It's not one of his sort of like crazy performances, but the way that this film is sort of like designed with him sort of venturing into the underworld of the Portland restaurant scene is just absolutely fantastic, and just him playing this almost like vagrant character who also knows everything about the restaurant industry is just a really fantastic journey that it takes us on. So I'm excited to see what this director does next, as certainly Nicolas Cage has only now he's got more freedom in the projects he's choosing to do. Has really been continuing on this track, as we saw with like the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, which was also really great, but failed to sort of crack my personal top 20 for this year. So
yeah, no, I mean, I never knew what Pig was about. I've heard of the movie before, but definitely I think Nicolas Cage's recent years has definitely, especially when you look at the indie films that now that he's kind of having the freedom to do what he wants, again, that he's choosing this indie route that there's been, like you mentioned a lot of them already. I haven't watched Mandy yet, but I mean, I watched Color Out of Space, and there's a lot of really interesting titles that he's been a part of. I think that that really kind of put him up there. Like, all these stories seem so fun. When you're talking about, like, him looking for a pig and kind of going through all that, you can't help but think about John Wick as he John Wick, where he's like going through all that for someone who killed his dog, right?
It's a very similar, but he's just not just if you just remove the punching people in the face elements, then you're pretty much on the right track. He's just this guy who he's happy living out in the wilderness, and it's all like the wrong people mess with him, so he goes looking for them. So
yeah, no, I mean, definitely this is one I've had on my eye on. I almost rented it one time this year, and now I feel really bad that it didn't.
Cool. Number 4, Kim.
So number 4, I have. I mean, if you find this all in my Friday Film Club picks, I'm sorry, but those are all my good movies this year. So I chose all the best stuff to share with everybody. So the next one is 2021's Time, which is a Hong Kong movie. It's basically my Hong Kong film pick of the year. Time is like a really good movie. I don't know if you ended up watching it.
I did.
Yeah.
I recommended this one to Stephen as well. After you recommended it to Friday Film Club, I think we had a discussion at some point about it, and this one was just wild and it's genre hopping because it's never ever one thing, is it? So
yeah. So basically, Time is a 2021 story, starring some very, very veteran actors and actresses. The cast as you have like three retired, like a retired assassin and his old partners. They kind of find this new purpose in their life by helping seniors end their lives. In their own way, basically, not waiting, not letting, sickness take them or ending their pain or in whatever way. Until they have a young woman who asks them to, take her life. And basically she ends up getting attached to the retired assassin. And from there, they start building the relationship from there. And you kind of start exploring the lives of these three people, including, how the girl is and the very odd relationship that happens. It almost feels a little bit like Tokyo Godfathers, where they kind of, from extension, build up this new family at the end. And there's something, there's so much to love because one, you have Patrick Z, who plays the retired assassin, and he, I believe, was 81 or 82 when he filmed this movie. And that it's wild to imagine him doing this, and he's still able to do some of the, action moves and all that stuff, right? But there's I think what it is really nice is that this one has this kind of comedy element in it. You also have some action in it, and there's a whole lot of drama and sentiments in this one as well. And I really think they're the balance that they achieve with all of these are so good, because the film focuses basically on kind of the neglect of the seniors in our society. And there's a big focus on people who neglect the, kind of whether it's your family or who have their family and then they neglect the things that they've done for you, or seniors who are living on their own, or people who are struggling have no other way to get out of it. I think that there's a societal reflection of in the film itself, embedded in all of this, assassin business.
Yeah, this is a really fantastic pick. As you said, Patrick Tate is great, even though that ponytail is questionable. He also has great support from Fung Bo Bo and Lam Suet. Lam Suet in particular has who plays the overweight chauffeur that drives them around, who's also having this sort of unrequited love affair with a local prostitute. And it's sort of like you get, when you're watching it, it's sort of like you get into it, it's sort of like, oh, it's going to be this film, and then it changes yours as soon as you get comfortable with it. So you have the introduction of Chung Soo Ying's character, who's who initially it seems like you're gonna have this this Leon thing where Patrick Swayze's character is going to like train her to become an assassin, and then it goes off from that, and he sort of like becomes more the father figure, and they're trying to connect her with her ex-boyfriend, and it just went in so many wonderful directions. And the fact that you've got, as you said already, you've got these elderly assassins who at certain times their skills seem like still as sharp as ever, and other times they seem not as sharp as others, such as like the scene where they're trying to interrogate the ex-boyfriend, and you see Fum Bobo doing some like rope skills, but she's managed to take out the light and stuff. So it's I really enjoyed this one, even though it didn't sort of crack my top 50. There was a period where it was in there, and I definitely really enjoyed this one. And I think it was on Netflix here in the UK, but I'm not sure if it's still there now. But
it's still on Netflix in Canada, so I think it's still on Netflix. It should. I think it should still be there. I don't know. Hopefully, it is.
Yeah. So I would recommend it. Definitely agree with your recommendation for that one, then, Kim.
It's my old Hong Kong nostalgia self being like, oh, this is such a great movie. And sometimes I wonder if that is, and that's why I was really happy when you were saying that you watched this and you kind of also liked it also. So it's nice. So what's your number 4?
Number 4, we have a classy costume drama period piece with Park Chan-wook's The Handmaiden from 2016. This is an adaptation of the novel Fingersmith, which was by the same author of Tipping the Velvet, set in which Park Chan-wook transfers the story to 1930s Korea, in which a young woman is hired to be the handmaiden of a Japanese heiress who is living on this giant estate, only to find out there is secrets within the family she's working for, and she has many secrets herself. This is a film which is obviously known for having some sexy elements in it, but it's also an absolutely gripping thriller and wonderfully stylishly shot. If I could compare it to sort of any film, it would be probably something like Ang Lee's Lost Caution. I think is a really interesting film to sort of like compare it to, and a film that I really enjoyed as well. But no, I'm a huge fan of Park Chan-wook, and with this film, it's once again he just produces this absolutely sumptuous looking film where he combines beautiful cinematography with some horrible acts indeed, and somehow makes it work the way that he does. But no, the Handmaiden is one that I would definitely recommend checking out, especially if you're a fan of Chan-wook's other films.
Yeah, I mean, The Handmaiden is like super hard to get an actual English sub version in Canada for some reason.
Oh, weird.
I have no idea why. Like, even when you go on YouTube, it's like they have a warning and they're like, oh, this is a Korean film with Korean subtitles. No English subtitles. I was like, but why are you selling it on YouTube? I was like,
it's great you're catering
me here?
It's great you're catering for the hard of hearing in Korea, but how about something for the rest of us?
Yeah, so that is one of the main reasons why The Handmaiden hasn't actually made it onto my viewing list. Mostly because I haven't been able to find a version where I can understand it. But no, I mean, Park Chan-wook, this is definitely one that I'm very interested in because, The Handmaiden, even when you think about like that kind of like sexy thriller type of thing, we kind of have a bit of that when we look at Stoker, which is also one of my favorite movies, like, ever. So, Park Chan-wook definitely has, proved that he can do some really great stuff when it comes to that. And, yeah, I mean, hopefully one day I'll have it soon.
We'll see if we can hook you up, Kim. So, onto the big numbers now. Number 3.
Yeah, number 3 is surprisingly a big movie and a new movie. And that's this year's Pixar, Disney Pixar movie, Turning Red. which I know a lot of people have issues with, but I do not. I think that the movie is very, very good. Turning Red is about a 13-year-old girl, Chinese girl, who is basically, you know, she real she eventually realizes that when she loses her temper, she turns into this giant red panda. And she doesn't really know what to do. This is set in Ontario, Toronto, and you basically, you know, have her where she realizes this curse, and then she starts having to control her emotions a little. But I think that, you know, what you know, the film is really talking about is basically the fact that it's about, you know, a girl going through changes in her adolescence. Obviously people got, you know, offended by, you know, like all this stuff, or bothered by it. But I actually think it was a really smart move to be using this, and a really nice angle to take a film like this, where, you know, you have a girl who's with a bunch of, you know, like people her age, and she's torn between, not only is it, you know, like family and being a good daughter and all that stuff, but also being able to embrace the things in tradition, like, you know, liking the boy band that she likes and all that, and being able to, you know, to have the rebellious stuff that she wants from it being a teen, but also having to deal with this predicament that she has, like that she tried to, you know, embrace this animal that's in her, or kind of or try to, you know, control it and get rid of it, right? No, there's so many like little deeper messages from it, and for a Pixar movie, I think it achieves quite a bit. Yeah.
No, Turning Red made my top 50 for this year. I really enjoyed the hell out of this one. I mean, yes, it's a Disney Pixar movie that's talking about periods. Oh my god, shocking stuff. But recently they've really been doing a lot of that, as they did a bunch of stuff with Big Hero 6's Baymax. They did a short where he's going out buying pads, and I think that's, you know, it's a natural thing. I know we all get embarrassed talking about these things, but I think it handled it really well. And it's funny that they use this as obviously the symbol for change, when I think back to like Carrie and so much anime where it's sort of like, and even like Ginger Snaps where it's sort of like the period signifies change, and it's normally like the awakening of powers, but obviously her power is that she turns into a giant red panda. As is her family's curse, and we even get to see a little bit of kaiju action there as well, with the giant rampaging giant red panda. It's really fantastically animated. I love her friend circle in particular. They've all got such great characters, and there's certain characters there that I look at them and I sort of link them back to like other female critics I know, like Heather and Jeanette. There's characters there within that group I can see, and not to be too cliche, and there's sort of like I saw it's like, oh, there's like the Pixar version of Kim, but that seemed like really on the nose. So, and James Hong puts in his like 1 millionth credit on his CV, so good for him.
Yeah, you know, when you think about movies about changing, like obviously from the ones that you were talking about, you know, there's also you know, I think that there's so many different angles of taking it that, you know, it takes me back to when I watched the German movie Blew My Mind, which is like a teenage girl transitioning, and she's transitioning into a mermaid, and and I think that, huh?
Of course she is.
and you think about it and you're like, well, you know, that's kind of like part horror, because there's an element of it that's very scary. But, you know, Turning Red takes like this really, you know, like, oh yeah, if only the periods was this, you know, cute little red panda. Even if there was like a huge anger to it and everything, I take that any day.
I did this the scene when she's like in a bedroom and she's lamenting about the fact she's a giant panda, and how that it's even like takes like Teen Wolf sort of angle where everyone embraces the giant panda.
Yeah,
they love the panda. So yeah, it's it's really great, and I was surprised with like when it came to the choice of the voice cast that this wasn't like we didn't have Michelle Yeoh turn up in this one, which I really thought that she did. Although we did have Chang from Orange Is the New Black.
Yes.
Provides the voice of one of the aunties. So
yeah, and the girl from what is that Netflix show? I forgot. Never Have I Ever does one of the friends' voice.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like as well. It's sort of like these aren't like Disney princess girls. They're like girls who are into nerdy things, and they're into Korean boy bands, and just all these things, like the fact she's like hammering away on a Tamagotchi. It's sort of like, oh, I've not thought about Tamagotchis in like since like the 90s. So good to see them revival. For my number 3, it's funny we mentioned Raw earlier in this film because Julia Dushkunov's latest film Titanie is my number 3 pick from 2021. This is a film which follows a young woman who's a model for car shows, who also has a kink of liking to have sex with cars. She's also a serial killer, who after her latest murder spree goes slightly astray, disguises herself as the missing boy of a fireman, and basically disguises herself as his missing son, all the while trying to sort of like disguise the fact that she's somehow become pregnant by the car that she had sex with. This is like Raw is a wonderfully bizarre movie, but at the same time has a logic that you're like, yeah, that totally works. But it's French, and I suppose it gets a bit of a extra yardstick to work with just on that fact alone. But no, this is a really great follow-up to Raw. If you enjoyed Raw, I think you're certainly going to kick out Titanie, as it's got a wonderful style to it, and certainly Dushkunov is just constantly proving herself time and time again as a director, with not only her feature work with Raw and this film, but also she's done episodes of the series Servant as well, which was really great as well. So yeah, I would definitely recommend giving that a look, especially if you like your horror weird.
Well, I mean, this is, no doubt it's on my list. I really loved Raw, and I think that Julie Ducournau has such a she's a really impressive female director, and I'm really interested like in the vision of this. But it makes me wonder as you're telling me the plot of this, obviously because I didn't know the plot before.
Yeah.
What is French people and and making out with and having like deep love for inanimate objects? I mean, I still remember watching Jumbo. It was
oh yeah, that was also on my list from this year. About the girl in love with the
amusement park ride. Yes.
And that's a comedy as well.
Yeah, no, that was what I thought of when I was like, oh my goodness, and I remember that was a French movie, so I even went to look that up just now, just to make sure.
Yeah, I've got no answer for you, Kim. Yeah, it's always great if you can have an out there concept and get your audience to buy into it, such as like Del Toro's Shape of Water.
Yeah.
Like his whole obsession of like, what if the gill man got the girl, and it's sort of like somehow he sold us all on this idea. It's like, how did you do this? And the same with like Titanie and Jumbo, we're somehow sold on these really outlandish premises, and I think if you can do that as a director, then you're certainly doing well.
I think so too.
But yeah, there's other elements to it, but I don't want to really spoil it to you if you've obviously not seen it. So I would just say if that outlandish concept just appeals to you, or if you just enjoyed Raw, then definitely go give it a watch. So
definitely will keep my eye out. My eyes have been out for this movie to rent and stuff, but I just haven't caught anything that haven't done it yet.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So yeah, my number 2 is is so unexpected as a list. I think you already know what it is, because you were the one who inspired me to watch it. And that's 1998's cult classic now, Deep Rising.
Oh wow! I thought this was gonna be like your number one pick. So number two is I'm still really impressed with, because yeah, this is a movie I think we've talked about a fair bit since. We've tried to work it into other lists as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for people who don't know, Deep Rising is a film about basically a crew that's been hired by mercenaries to go to a unknown location, which they soon realize is a luxury cruise ship. And as they board this luxury cruise ship, they realize that the cruise ship is now empty. They don't know what's happened to it, and obviously we know, because the beginning scene we saw what happened, where the ship mysteriously has been attacked by something. And as they explore, they start, kind of discovering what is chasing them slowly. Basically, this is a creature feature film, and it's just so good. And the best part is this movie is great all the way till the end, where we have this catchphrase, this catch line, I guess, from the main character, who's played by Treat Williams, who basically he's like, "What now?" and the ending ends with "What now?" and then you kind of expect it to have this sequel, but it never happened, which really sucks.
No, originally this was going to be the prequel to King Kong remake, but unfortunately got stuck in development hell. So it now ends on this just weird cliffhanger where you're just like, I want Deep Rising 2. And we're never going to get that. We're never going to get his vision of King Kong, because obviously Peter Jackson picked up the rights and did his epic version of it, which is also great. So I suppose you could always watch that and fudge the details together. But no, Deep Rising also gave us one of many reasons to be afraid of sitting on the toilet, between this and arachnophobia. So yeah, I can't recommend more, and especially as we're in the festive season, I think it's
probably
a great
Snakes
time
on
to
the
watch
Plane goes in that list as well.
Does it? I forgot about Snakes on a Plane. So yeah, great pick, Kim.
So what's your number two?
My number two is a film that almost knocked my number one pick off, and a film that I've been meaning to watch for quite a while, and that's Road Games from 1981, directed by Richard Franklin. This is the Ozploitation version of Rear Window, as Stacey Keach plays a truck driver going across the Australian outback who becomes obsessed with this man in a van who he assumes to be a serial killer. Along the way, he encounters the same people, and his paranoia sort of grows all the more as he keeps encountering this man in his van along the way, picking up Jamie Lee Curtis as a hitchhiker as the pair try to piece together what the actual mystery is. This is a really, really fantastic thriller, and one that just sort of had me hooked from start to finish. And I think Stacey Keach is fantastic in this one, as is Jamie Lee Curtis as well. So it was also received a film where they got a lot of backlash at the time, because they were American actors seemingly stealing jobs from Australian actors, which didn't go down too well. But both are absolutely phenomenal in this, and it's got a colourful cast of characters on this sort of road trip / thriller, and it sort of plays up the tropes of which made Hitchcock's Rear Window work so well, but obviously as a road movie.
It is. I've never heard of this one. but it sounds interesting. I mean, I've been watching a lot of stuff about cars chasing stuff down recently, and
yeah.
it's interesting. Obviously everything for me where you talk about cars and being in a car chase starts with Duel. And I always love to refer to that one a lot. But I mean, I also recently watched Highwaymen, so yesterday from this recording. So So yeah, there's a lot of, I don't know. I think that movies, when they use this type of scenario of being down the highway and being in these kind of like tracking people on highways and things like that, it's when you're actually in a moving destination, it's always very interesting to capture in a film.
Yeah, it's sort of like taps in the fact that you encounter, like, you go on a long road trip and you encounter like the same people over and over again, and just this amazing that you can build this sort of like list of suspects, and just like how paranoia grows just from like catching glimpses of this one person that you start to assume is up to no good. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this one, and obviously being an exploitation movie, plays in perfectly with their love of working car chases into every conceivable genre they can. For some reason, Australians love car chases. So you watch like coming of age dramas, something like Frog Dreaming, and there's like a car chase sequence in it for no reason at all. It's just any excuse that they got to work them in. So, but number one, Kim, what is the number one pick?
Number one is actually very, very suitable in this spot because its sequel just came out on Netflix. And that's 2019's Knives Out, which is an American film, which reminds you a lot of, films like Hercule Poirot from, Hercule Poirot's character from Agatha Christie novels, where, they've obviously created this detective, Benoit Blanc, which is played by Daniel Craig. So basically, what Knives Out is it's a story about a master detective called Benoit Blanc, who is investigating the death of this patriarch, who is played by Christopher Plummer. Who is the patriarch of this wealthy and very dysfunctional family. And he goes and basically starts exploring everybody. And he obviously also seeks out the help of the caretaker of this patriarch, who is played by Ana de Armas. And I mean, it's a pretty impressive cast overall, and I think that really helps with your Jamie Lee Curtis, Chris Evans, Michael Shannon, Don Johnson, Toni Collette, and it's a really impressive movie. The mystery itself, how the investigation goes, Daniel Craig with a southern accent, everything comes together to really create a very, very good movie.
Yeah, this is one that definitely I came to late in the game. I think it's the fact that Glass Onion's obviously coming on to Netflix for December that sort of finally gave me the kick up the ass to finally watch it. And I know that we have an episode on this one which is coming up. So definitely look out for that in your subscription feed. And yeah, we definitely both enjoyed this one, even though it did make my top 50 list for a period, and then it sort of like got knocked off by other things. And certainly with when we had Daniel Craig doing the southern accent, there was obviously that potential for it to go too sort of cliche, too comedic, and I think he just walks that fine line just right. So I'm excited to see what he does with this character, because I think it's a proposed trilogy, and Glass Onion has also promises its own collection of quirky characters as well, which includes Dave Bautista turning up in another unique role for him. So
yeah, well, I mean, I believe we're going to be doing an episode on Glass Onion fairly soon as well, so
yep,
you can keep your eye out on that as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and what's your big number one title?
My number one title is Everything Everywhere All at Once. Michelle Yeoh's phenomenal performance, and oh look, another Jamie Lee Curtis movie making its way onto the list. Michelle Yeoh, obviously a huge fan of. If you've probably heard me gush about her hair, and certainly on the Asian Cinema Film Club, you've heard me and Stephen talk about. I love Michelle Yeoh a lot, and certainly this is one of a number of exciting roles that she's been putting in recently. And here she plays a laundry owner who is facing problems with her tax. She's got a wayward daughter and a husband who is kind of doesn't seem to be taking life too seriously. And then she finds out that she is possibly the one person who is going to help save the universe by tapping into the skills and abilities of her other selves across the multiverse. This was one of a number of multiverse movies that we've had recently. We had this, and we had the recent Doctor Strange movie in the Multiverse of Madness. So this one's especially fun, and it goes in some really fun, weird directions. And this is probably one of the few A24, I want to say the studios, one of their output that I've just really enjoyed, and it's not been sort of like too sort of highbrow, but I just really enjoyed the creativity of this one and just how this really out there sort of concept, because it's from the same makers of Swiss Army Man. What they've done with the action sequences here, and it's fun as well when you look at the fact that you've got the guy who the kid who was formerly Short Round in Temple of Doom is now an adult, and obviously has been working as a martial arts choreographer for many years on things such as like The One. Now turns up as an adult actor and puts in this really fantastic supporting role as Michelle Yeoh's husband, and it taps into some really fun sort of quirky alternate worlds. We even get a world which feels like a nod to In the Mood for Love. The only sort of criticism I have, and this is just me being stupid really, is the fact that we don't have a world which just her and Maggie Chung hanging out. Just her, just those two having a muffin or something. I would have been like fanboyed the hell out of this movie. It would have been like we would have to create numbers above one for how happy I would have been with this movie. But even though that doesn't happen, I think it's a phenomenal performance from the whole cast, in particular Michelle Yeoh, and Jamie Lee Curtis is on fantastic supporting duty as well. So if you've not seen this, it is Amazon Prime exclusive, so you can check it out on there. And I think it's another of those films where you think this is such a out there concept, there's no way that other people is going to be like have this mass appeal, and yet somehow it really has, and people have been able to jive with it. So that is my number one pick for this year.
That's really good. I mean, I didn't know it was an Amazon Prime exclusive, so I'm going to get on that right away.
Hopefully it is, and it's not just like in the UK that you have, because I know that
who knows, it might be.
Netflix US have got the bullet train, and we haven't in the UK, that's for sure. So
yeah, but I mean, considering the recent watch of Michelle Yeoh that I had was from Last Christmas with a role called Santa, and then she has this really, really incredible part where she talks about how if she adapts her name, that she's not really called Santa, and she adapts her name to whatever she's doing, and then you can't imagine like Michelle Yeoh being like in a pet shop and her name's called Kitty. So yeah, Michelle Yeoh is fantastic. Like I love her in a lot of stuff, and I think like when you talk about movies like even like Crazy Rich Asians, like I like the movie, but not to the extent of a lot of people. But I think she did like a crazily great performance there, and I think she really just like she's just a woman of so much elegance, grace, and yet she can like kick some ass. It's fantastic.
She's just, it seems to be like no limit to like the roles you play. You think that a lot of young actresses, they sort of hit this sort of like period where I know that Amy Schumer called it the last day of being fuckable, where they just sort of like get sort of like pushed to the sides and to the next sort of wave of young models to come in. And then you have actors like Michelle Yeoh who've just been working steadily and just putting out she's only putting out more interesting performances as she sort of like goes on. When you go from like her early days doing movies with like Golden Harvest, and now we see the film she's like done in the West and things like this and Sunshine, she just constantly turns up in interesting places and just gives these phenomenal performances. And yeah, I'm just so it just makes you all the more glad that when she retired, when she married Dixon Poon, that the marriage didn't sort of work out, just so she can come back and make awesome movies like this. So
yeah, I guess.
So yes, that was my number one pick. And Kim, you definitely given me plenty to watch as well. So thank you for yours picks tonight as well.
I think yours is a deeper exploration so far.
It's like, well, that was nice. I'm glad you had fun.
Yours is like 50s, 60s, 80s, you know.
But no, if you haven't done already, please do hit the like and subscribe button wherever you happen to be listening to us. Leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show. It all helps raise the profile of the show. You can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Come say hi to us there. And you can also check out our blog, which is musingtpodcast.wordpress.com. But until next time, thank you for listening. Thank you to my co-host Kim. And we will, of course, be back next year with a brand new season of films. We're going to be looking at the history of the Creature feature movie. We've got some great After Hours picks as well coming up as well. So plenty to come in 2023. But until then, hope you had a lovely festive season and a happy new year. And make sure you join us in 2023 for more movies and tea.